there comes a moment when a person finally stops moving. Maybe they sit on the edge of a bed, or pause on a crowded bus, or lower themselves onto a cold bathroom floor. The scene changes, but the feeling stays the same. They don't sit because their body is tired. They sit because something deep inside them quietly folds. It isn't dramatic. It isn't loud. It's a soft collapse. The kind that happens when a heart has been carrying more weight than it was ever meant to hold. It's the moment where the soul exhales in defeat, almost whispering, "I can't hold all of this anymore." People who have been through too much recognize this moment instinctively. It is a silent unraveling that only the overwhelmed understand. People often look at someone who has been through too much and wonder why they seem so calm in moments that should disturb them. They ask questions like, "Why doesn't this bother you?" as if calmness were a choice. But it isn't calmness, and it isn't peace. It's the quiet numbness that appears when a mind has carried more than it was built to handle. It's the stillness that settles in when emotions have been pushed past their limits, again and again, until they lose their ability to react the way others do. To the outside world, this looks like composure. To the person living it, it's simply what remains after feeling has been exhausted. Most people imagine resilience as strength, as courage, as something admirable. But for someone who has endured too much, resilience often feels more like survival, a reflex they never asked for, a posture they learned because life gave them no other option. And in that quiet resilience, there is a psychology that others sense even if they can't explain it. There is something almost unmistakable in a person who has carried too much pain. A certain weight in their presence, a quiet depth in their eyes, a softness in how they listen, as if they've learned to absorb the world carefully, one emotion at a time. They move through life as if something inside them has shifted permanently. Not in a dramatic way, but in the subtle way a landscape changes after a storm. Their mind begins to reorganize itself. Their nervous system becomes alert, sensitive to tones, pauses, shifts in atmosphere. They notice things others overlook. A slight change in someone's voice, a small hesitation, the unspoken tension in a room. It isn't magic. It isn't intuition. It's adaptation. When someone has endured more emotional weight than they were meant to carry, their inner world develops its own rules. They learn to anticipate what might go wrong long before anything actually happens. They prepare for impact even when impact isn't coming. This sensitivity isn't a gift they chose. It's a survival skill shaped by experience. And even if healing begins, the mind keeps traces of those early defenses, like old architecture hidden beneath a renovated building. People who have carried too much often move through the world with a kind of quiet instruction manual no one else can see. An invisible curriculum written by every moment life demanded more from them than they were ready to give. They learn to read silence the way others read words. They sense tension before it rises to the surface. They step carefully around conflict, as if navigating shards of broken glass. They become the person who steadies a room, who calms others while their own chest trembles, who shrinks when attention feels threatening. They recover from disappointment faster than they should, because life never allowed them the luxury of falling apart slowly. Many mistake these reflexes for personality traits, as if gentleness, patience, or quietness were simply who they are. But these behaviors were shaped, not chosen. They are learned responses, psychological reflexes that formed in self-defense. Over time, these responses become automatic. The nervous system reacts before the mind even understands why, creating habits of care, caution and emotional management that others rarely notice but rely on without realizing it. These invisible skills may look like intuition, but more often they are survival written into the body. There is a remarkable tenderness in people who have been through too much. A gentleness that wasn't learned from comfort, but carved from difficulty. Their empathy doesn't come from theory. It comes from memory, from knowing firsthand how heavy pain can feel. They notice small shifts in mood, soften their voice without thinking, offer warmth instinctively, as if they're trying to give others what they themselves were denied. To the world, this kindness looks natural, effortless, beautiful. But behind it lies a quiet exhaustion, not the kind that sleep can fix, but the kind that builds when someone has carried more emotions than their heart was designed to hold. They become the person who comforts everyone, yet struggles to remember the last time someone comforted them. They know how to hold space, but not how to ask for space. They know how to soothe others, but not how to admit their own shaking hands. This exhaustion doesn't shout, it withdraws. It hides behind soft smiles and calm voices, disguised as stability. But beneath it all lies a truth almost no one sees. Their strength was never voluntary. It was required. People often wonder why those who have endured too much become so self-reliant. Why they handle everything alone. Why they rarely ask for help. To outsiders, it looks like confidence, like independence, like strength. But for them, it's something entirely different. It's protection. When someone grows up learning that support is unpredictable, that emotions can be dismissed, that leaning on others may lead to disappointment, their mind adapts. It teaches them to depend on themselves first, not out of pride, but out of necessity. They learn how to soothe their own fears, analyze their own thoughts, carry their own weight. They build routines, habits, internal systems that keep their world stable because the outside one rarely was. On the surface, they appear composed, collected, steady, but inside, the story is different. Their inner world is delicate, sensitive, often overwhelmed. And because vulnerability has felt dangerous, they reveal themselves slowly, carefully, as if unwrapping something fragile. This emotional independence is not a declaration of strength. It is a shield, worn by someone who has learned that safety must often be created from within. People who have been through too much often live with a quiet contradiction inside them. A kind of emotional duality that shapes how they move through the world. They can appear open, yet their guard never fully drops. They can be caring, yet keep a safe distance. They can seem present and grounded, yet their mind is always scanning the atmosphere, measuring every shift, every tone, every possibility. Their relationships become a delicate balance, not because they lack love, but because their love carries history. The memories of times when vulnerability led to hurt, misunderstanding, imbalance. For them, vulnerability is not simple. It's a calculation, a slow unfolding, a measured step into a space that once felt unsafe. They reveal themselves in layers, not to hide, but to protect. Each layer is a quiet test. Is this safe? Can this moment hold me? Can this person understand without taking advantage of the opening? Others might mistake this care for coldness or emotional restraint, but it is simply the body remembering old wounds and choosing caution over collapse. This duality is not a flaw. It is the nervous system trying to keep a fragile world from breaking again. There is a misunderstanding people often have about those who've carried too much pain. They assume the intense reactions come from the present moment, from whatever small thing happened right now. But that's never the full story. When someone who has lived through emotional overload reacts strongly, they're not reacting to now. They're reacting to every echo hidden beneath the surface. Echoes of moments where they felt unprotected, unheard, unseen. Their body remembers patterns long before their mind finds the words. A shift in tone, a moment of inconsistency, a hint of abandonment. These are not small to them. They are signals the nervous system learned to fear. So they stay quiet. They hide their triggers. They smooth over conflict with a smile. They choose harmony even when their heart feels unsettled, because the fear of being misunderstood often hurts more than the discomfort itself. And yet, in the middle of all that silent struggle, they become the emotional anchor for others, the listener, the calm presence, the one people turn to when their own world feels unstable. Not because they have it easy, but because they've learned to understand emotions at a depth most never reach. They can see cracks before they appear. They can sense what someone is really feeling, even when their words say something different. They detect the tension in a room the way others detect sound. This awareness is a quiet superpower, but it comes with a cost. They carry emotions that were never theirs to hold. They become the healer without noticing. And healers, if they aren't careful, become exhausted in ways no one else can see. Exhaustion shows itself differently in people who have carried too much. It doesn't explode. It doesn't break open in dramatic displays. It slips in silently, almost politely. They begin to withdraw in small ways. Their messages get shorter. Their voice grows softer. Their presence becomes lighter, as if they're slowly trying to fade into the background without alarming anyone. When someone asks if they're all right, they offer the same practiced answer. I'm okay. Not because they are, but because explaining the storm inside them would require a language they no longer have the energy to speak. They've learned that sharing too much can feel like burdening others, that unpacking their emotions may lead to misunderstanding, that revisiting old pain is its own form of exhaustion. So they choose silence, not out of secrecy, but out of preservation. Yet beneath that silence lies a strength few people recognize. It's not the loud kind, not the heroic kind. It's the quiet endurance of someone who has survived too many emotional winters to fear the cold anymore. They have walked through storms without umbrellas. They have rebuilt themselves from pieces no one else even noticed had broken. And that quiet endurance becomes their way of moving through the world, steady, soft, and almost impossibly resilient. Despite everything they've lived through, despite the exhaustion tucked behind their calm face, there is still a quiet hope inside them. A small, steady ember that refuses to die. People who have been through too much still long for connection. They still crave softness. They still dream of a life where they aren't forced to be the strong one all the time. Even when their heart feels hesitant, even when their mind whispers caution, there is a part of them that keeps reaching forward. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. And what shapes them the most is not just what happened to them, but how they learn to interpret it. They don't move through pain blindly. They analyze it. They sit with it. They turn it over in their hands until meaning begins to appear in places where there was once only hurt. They find clarity in chaos, lessons in heartbreak, purpose in the places where they once felt lost. This worldview becomes both fragile and powerful. Fragile because it was built from real wounds. Powerful because it holds real wisdom. They see people more clearly. They understand emotions more deeply. They recognize that everyone carries a story that rarely reaches the surface. And because of this, They become forgiving in a way that surprises others. Not out of weakness, but out of comprehension. They know that wounded people often move through the world in wounded ways. They understand that healing is not linear, that boundaries matter, and that compassion is essential. There is a kind of grief that doesn't look like grief at all. A quiet sadness carried by people who have been through too much, not from losing someone, but from losing versions of themselves along the way. They grieve the person who once trusted easily, the one who laughed without restraint, the one who wasn't afraid of uncertainty, the version of themselves who believed in happy endings without analyzing every possible outcome. That person didn't disappear suddenly. They faded, slowly, silently, worn away by moments that demanded strength when softness would have been kinder. This grief doesn't break them, but it shapes them. It makes them more thoughtful, more observant, more intentional. They begin to cherish things others overlook: a calm morning, a genuine conversation, the presence of someone who feels safe. Small moments become sacred because they've lived through chapters where nothing felt safe at all. Yet even with this invisible grief, they continue to grow, not loudly, not quickly, but quietly in ways the world rarely notices. They learn boundaries. They learn the difference between instinct and trauma. They learn to rebuild trust carefully, not recklessly. They learn that opening up again is not a weakness, but a form of courage. Their evolution moves softly, but it moves. People who have been through too much are rarely defined by the events themselves. They are shaped by what they chose to become afterward. They carry scars, but they also carry insight. They hold memories that still ache, but also compassion that stretches farther than most people understand. They have been wounded, but they have also learned how to grow around the wound without letting it harden their heart. The more they understand their own psychology, the more they realize something quietly liberating. Nothing about them is broken. Their caution makes sense. Their depth makes sense. Their silence makes sense. Every adaptation was a form of intelligence. Every reflex was a way of staying safe. Every wall they built was a temporary shelter for a world that felt too sharp. Their mind is not a battlefield. It is a testament, a record of every storm they survived, every night they held themselves together, every moment they chose maturity when all they wanted was relief. And perhaps the most beautiful truth is that people who have lived through so much often become lighthouses without realizing it. Not because they shine the brightest, but because they know darkness intimately. Not because they are perfect, but because they understand what it feels like to be lost, afraid, or unheard. Their presence becomes a kind of guidance, a quiet clarity, a warm light in a world that can feel cold. They listen without judgment. They soothe without effort. They understand without needing the whole story. And slowly, without trying, their pain turns into perspective. Their perspective turns into wisdom, and their wisdom becomes a soft kind of power. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be real. There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when someone who has been through too much begins to notice that they see life differently than others. It doesn't happen suddenly. It doesn't arrive with a revelation. It appears slowly, through small observations that slip into awareness without knocking. They notice that situations that make other people panic barely shake them anymore. Moments that excite others feel muted inside their own chest. Their mind is always 2 steps ahead, scanning, anticipating, bracing for emotional ripples before they even appear. This doesn't make them strange. It makes them shaped. People who've lived through too much form a relationship with reality that is both intimate and distant. They feel everything intensely, sometimes too intensely, yet they've learned to detach from that intensity when it threatens to overwhelm them. This balance, the ability to care deeply while protecting themselves quietly, is not something they were taught. It is something the mind constructs as a survival structure. Psychologists call it emotional duality, but in daily life, it simply looks like someone who navigates storms with an expression that never reveals how violent the winds truly are. This duality shapes their relationships too. Not because they lack love, but because their love is cautious. They hesitate before trusting joy. They analyze comfort before allowing themselves to feel safe within it. They imagine endings before beginnings have fully settled. They care more than they admit and forgive more than they should. But when someone asks, "What do you need?" they often fall silent because they never learned how to desire without guilt. Their love is steady, loyal, quietly intense, but this sincerity comes with a cost. Inconsistency wounds them. Carelessness cuts deeply. Because inconsistency feels like the first sign of being left behind again. People misunderstand this sensitivity. They label it dramatic, fragile, emotional, but they never see the truth. These reactions are echoes. The present moment awakens old memories that were never fully allowed to heal. So they hide their triggers. They bury their fears. They smile through discomfort because explaining their inner world feels harder than carrying it alone. And yet, despite all of this, they become the emotional anchor for the people around them. They read unspoken sentences. They pick up on tension in a room before anyone else notices. They sense when a friend is hurting, even when that friend insists they're fine. This sensitivity becomes a kind of vision, a quiet superpower, but it also becomes a burden, because they end up holding emotions that were never theirs to hold. Healers exhaust themselves quietly. They fade gently, not out of disinterest, but out of overload. Still, beneath that exhaustion lives a resilience few can comprehend. It's not loud, not visible, not heroic in the way stories portray strength. It's the resilience of someone who has rebuilt themselves more than once, who has survived emotional winters without warmth or shelter, who continues to rise, to trust, to feel, even after every part of them has learned to be cautious. They still want connection. They still seek understanding. They still hope for softness. They still dream of a life where strength isn't a requirement but a choice. And slowly, their pain becomes perspective. Their perspective becomes wisdom. Their wisdom becomes a quiet light. The kind of light that makes them a lighthouse, not because they shine the brightest, but because they know what darkness feels like. And that knowledge becomes guidance. It becomes warmth. It becomes a presence that reassures without speaking. People who have gone through too much become lighthouses not by intention, but by survival.